Hello and thanks for joining me. This time I thought I'd talk to you about a different topic from COVID, and it's euthanasia. It's a topic that's due to heat up in the New South Wales Parliament when they resume later in this month. But first, a quick story. When St. Teresa of Calcutta, admired the world over for her heroic work and that of her sisters amongst the poorest of the poor, was interviewed by a journalist and asking her about euthanasia. And in her simplicity, she said to him, "Euthanasia, what is that?" And he said, it's when people kill others to make them die, who want to die. And she said, "Oh yeah, I'm against killing. It's not good that people should kill one another." She drew him out in her question to force him to admit what euthanasia is really like and what it is. No matter which way the proponents of euthanasia try to mask it, it is always killing an innocent human being. And the fundamental law on which civilized societies are based is that we don't kill one another. We actually respect one another. We have suicide prevention units. We have helplines. Why? Because we think fundamentally that life is a good thing. And so euthanasia just goes against that very essence of a democratic and civilized society. Historically, euthanasia comes from, or etymologically I should say, euthanasia comes from two Greek words, meaning, thanatos, meaning a good or well, and thanatos meaning death. So a good death. But what really constitutes a good death? Christian believers and even non-Christian believers have always thought that a good death is actually when you die at peace, with peace of a good conscience and at peace with your Creator, and able to go into the next life knowing that you've done well on this earth as well as you could be, and then able to go for your eternal reward. Christians have a particular understanding of this as being in the state of grace and at peace with God. So that's what a good death really is all about. But mercy killing is never a good death. It is never compassion. What a person needs who is suffering deeply is love. That's real compassion. What often motivates euthanasia is that a person is left alone, isolated, and unloved. In their deep illness, they feel that they have nothing to live for. This is what motivates euthanasia, what motivates someone to want to end their lives. If, on the other hand, they had love in their lives, if, on the other hand, they had people who cared about them and wanted to make them feel special and tell them that they are valuable, people will hang on for love. So the answer to euthanasia, which is often coming because of deep loneliness, is precisely to provide such a person with love. Now, when a person is given love, they feel appreciated, they feel welcome, they feel taken care of, they feel they have a purpose to live for. But without love, then all sorts of despairing thoughts come in. So, palliative care is in fact the way to care for somebody who is ill. Very often the proponents of euthanasia like to paint a picture of a person who is dying, an incurable illness, and they are dying in excruciating pain with no painkillers, and they're just left in their misery. Deliberately designed to tug at your heartstrings, to tug at your compassion. And then they slip in the word saying, "Give them a lethal injection, and this is the way to help such a person." That is a lie. They're actually playing on your mind. They're in fact carrying out what some psychologists will call psychological jamming. Notably, people like Joseph Nicolosi, where you present a very powerful a very powerful pictorial image, a visual image, with a very negative audio sense. So the powerful image would be a person, for instance, who is suffering and dying and who is in despair. And that appeals to your tenderness, to your compassion, if you have a compassionate heart. The audio image is in fact that euthanasia is the way to help them. Now, in our mind, these two messages are conflicting. But what wins out, because we live in a visually dominated culture, is the visual image. So you feel sorry for this person, and the message that somehow killing them is the way to help them. It's an exploitation of people's true compassion. On the other hand, the real way to help a person who is suffering and dying from an incurable disease is to show them love, to tell them that they are special, to tell them that they are loved, that they are valuable. And of course, through palliative care, to give them the morphine or whatever other drug they need to make them comfortable so that the pain is controlled. Even in the more extreme elements of an illness, the pain may, or the dosage that's required, may in fact slow them down and shorten their life. The palliative care intention and the euthanasia intention are fundamentally different. Palliative care is always to make a person more comfortable, even though it may actually shorten their life in some sense. However, the intention behind euthanasia is always to kill. If one dose of an injection doesn't kill them, then you give them another, and another, and another. The reality, though, is that what's going on behind a euthanasia campaign? You see, it's not about actually helping a person to die. Anybody in our society knows that they can take their own lives. Anybody knows that. What a euthanasia campaign is trying to say that the state, to give permission to say that it's okay to kill oneself. In other words, it's encouraging the state to say and go against something fundamental to a civilized society. As I started earlier in this video, a civilized society always values its members and thinks it's a bad idea to kill one another, right? Killing an innocent human being is always a bad thing. But euthanasia campaigners want to have the state say it's okay, so that they themselves can remove the stigma from either their own lives or the lives of people they think would be susceptible to this, and say it's okay to suicide. It's okay to suicide. Whereas most people that I know and have known over the years would think it's a bad thing to suicide. And when we look at suicide statistics, particularly in the young, Australia has some of the highest in the world, we actually think this is a sad reality, that someone wants to end his or her own life. But the reality on the ground is people can take their own lives, and they already know that. So in wanting to have a law that actually facilitates this is actually something even more sinister. It's wanting the state to move from a position of protecting life and see it for its goodness to saying, you know what, life isn't actually really good. You reach a used by date, and that person, when they reach that date, they should be killed. That is a terrible message. And to think that a euthanasia campaign or bill is being presented in a time of pandemic, how heartless and insensitive the timing is, when so many people are in sadness and having a tough time wrestling with mental illness and depression, and then being given a message that your life potentially isn't worth living. That is a terrible message indeed. Suicide is always a bad thing, and we need to tell people who are in this sadness or in an illness, that their life is worth living. Besides these other issues, euthanasia laws, wherever they have been enshrined in law around the world, have typically been abused. What makes us think that New South Wales will be any different from any of these countries, as indeed it would demonstrate in any of our states or territories where it's been introduced as law? So euthanasia legislation can always be abused. Why? Because dead people don't make lawsuits. Dead people are not parts of, or don't form part of, a class actions against doctors, against medical health practitioners who may have abused their authority. In this terrible bill, unfortunately, even the doctor may suggest that a person take this course of action. A doctor who takes what's called the Hippocratic Oath, that first you must do no harm. Killing an innocent human being is always doing harm. So, what can you do? If you disagree with euthanasia, then I encourage you and urge you, first of all, to contact your local member in the New South Wales Parliament, and to call them, or call as many of them as you can. And first of all, be polite. Politicians are human beings, they deserve your respect. But ask them in no uncertain terms to vote no to this terrible legislation that does not protect our citizens. Tell them your strong convictions. Remind them that they are there to represent you. Tell them that palliative care is the viable option. Tell them that killing someone isn't a form of compassion at all, but showing them love is what makes them, is in fact compassion. And tell them how easily abused these laws are and have been around the world. And last and certainly not least, if you are a believer, I invite you to pray. The power of prayer opens us up and opens the heart of the Lord to release grace, to move the hearts of our leaders so that they will indeed enshrine laws that will protect our citizens. Thank you for joining me. If you've liked this video, press like, subscribe, and the bell to receive further notifications. And I look forward to joining you again very soon.